Marvel Rivals Season 1 has finally kicked off to some record numbers that are just freaking insane. But a lot of people are really wondering exactly how weak many of the nerfed characters are and what is the meta in Marvel Rivals now. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about just how bad the nerfs are for some of the nerfed characters and the biggest losers that are going to be having a rough time at the start of Season 1. Now, a lot of you have been asking about coaching, and we're actually starting a Marvel Rivals Academy with a free coaching event kickoff. So join the Discord down below, and I'll see you there. Now, the first character we got to talk about is Hela. Just how bad is Hela now compared to how she was before? Is she unplayable? Is she still the strongest character? What exactly do these changes mean for her in the new season? Well, with less damage, some of her damage combos don't work. Triple body shot doesn't work. Headshot body shot will not kill anymore on a lot of characters. So this is going to make her less lethal overall. And with the less health total, she is going to be easier to duel and dive in some situations. But overall, the character is still going to be very freaking strong. A lot of people didn't realize just how much stronger Hela was than the rest of the cast, because at the highest elos where people really had good aim, she was just perma-banned all the freaking time. But Hela was just so much better than so many different characters that it made sense that she was banned all that time. Because think about it. She has great mobility, very long distance damage, which is important when we have really powerful shield tanks that are seeing a lot of play in the meta. And she has an amazing crowd control ability that can stun enemies and just allow her to shut down divers. So she doesn't really have any core weaknesses, and she has some really strong strengths. And yes, those strengths are not as strong as they were before, but it's not about Hela compared to her past self. It's Hela compared to the rest of the characters in the game, and Hela is still a top 3 DPS undoubtedly. In addition to that, she's one of the best characters, maybe the best character to contest characters like Iron Man, Storm, Star-Lord. So as much as I wanted to put Hela on like the actual losers tier going into this season, she's not. She's just not. She's very, very strong still. The next character people wonder about is Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange, now his shield doesn't generate as much. There's fall off on his really powerful close range burst ability that can hit multiple targets. Is this character now unplayable because of these changes? The answer is no, and in fact, Doctor Strange is most likely still the best tank, and he's undoubtedly a top 2 tank. The thing about Strange is he was just clearly the best tank before, and these changes don't dethrone him in any way. They don't change what he could fundamentally do. He's very consistent damage. He has very consistent mitigation. He's very hard to punish with his mitigation and his movement that can allow him to go vertical and get out of a lot of bad situations. And not only is his ultimate extremely strong, maybe a top 5 ultimate in the game that can just wipe teams, but his teleporter is like ultimate level in power level. Basically, these changes were like a slap on the wrist to Doctor Strange. And while I think other tanks like Magneto are becoming better in this meta because the prevalence of Wolverines and the fact that, you know, Doctor Strange getting a little bit weaker helps characters that are comparable to him, we're seeing a lot of dual Magneto and Doctor Strange compositions for one, and for two, Doctor Strange just does stuff that is very unique to him. And really, Doctor Strange is not being moved or dismantled from his position at all. So yeah, if you want to learn a tank this season, I would still recommend Doctor Strange over any other tank, basically. Now, number 3 is Mantis, and I played for like 10 hours on the first day, and I saw very little Mantis play, and this is crazy. Mantis is still a top 3 support, most likely still the strongest support in the game. And look, I get it. It's not as fun when you lose your mobility, but Mantis did not rely on her mobility to be good. It was kind of like an icing on the cake. Being able to be faster at max HP, that's nice. It's icing on the cake, especially if you were someone that liked to be a bit aggressive. It was cool to have that on her, but that's undoubtedly not why she was the best support. Having damage boost that she gives to people when they're aggressive and making plays, having damage boost to herself and applying a lot of poke damage, and having a, you know, top maybe 6 ultimate, top 5 ultimate in addition to that, plus having a super easy to hit crowd control that if someone's in your back line, they're not going to be woken up, they're just going to stay asleep for just a ridiculous amount of time. Mantis had so many reasons to be good, and yes, it sucks that this nerf hit her for people that like mobility and like the feel of it, but it's nothing that will dethrone her. Now, the only thing that I could see is other competition in, you know, for the Mantis slot, right? Cloak and Dagger getting buffed, characters like Invisible Woman, it's still unclear how strong they are. Luna, I think, gets big wins this season because of the Namor synergy, but even with more competition, you know, that's just gonna also lessen the pick rate of all the other supports as well. Mantis is still gonna rise through a lot of that as undoubtedly a top 3 support, most likely a top 2, and I'm guessing a top 1. So anyways, Mantis is still the LeBron fucking James of supports, but now we gotta talk about Hawkeye. So Hawkeye, in a lot of ways, is gonna play almost exactly the same as he did before. He's still gonna one-tap in a similar fashion. He charges it on the front line and he shoots the back line. Like, yes, it has lesser ranges, but it's not really changing the core playstyle anymore because, you know, if he's shooting at people super far away, he just charges it on that front line anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. And yes, he did get damage nerfs, but he could still kill all the supports, which are the main targets that he wanted to kill anyways, so it's not really fundamentally changing him in a way that matters, and he's still going to be super strong, especially into like these triple support comps or compositions without divers. Hawkeye is still strong as ever, really. Like, you're not really going to feel the difference that much compared to now, compared to how he was, you know, slightly less uptime, more charge time. Like, these things are going to make him slightly weaker, but the core reason that Hawkeye was so good is that, boom, you could, like, not be out of position and die in the back line, and he could generate a pick without actually having to invest in ability or anything like that. Through healing, didn't matter. He could kill somebody. That being said, I'll still die on the hill that Hawkeye is still over-nerfed compared to how good he always has been. I think it's particularly because it's more annoying to get one shot than like anything else in games like this, where especially supports that don't have a lot of agency over that really want it to get nerfed. But aggressive dive tanks and dive DPS have a lot of ways to shut down a Hawkeye, and he's not similar to Hela in the fact that he is really weak against characters that come after him. Hela has a lot of game against that, from the high burst damage to the crowd control to the much better movement than Hawkeye. So yeah, he's still as weak as ever to counters, but he's still as strong as ever, nearly as strong as ever to just about everything else. So yeah, he's basically not changed that much. Now, the next one is the Hulk, and the Hulk did get some shield nerfs, but once again, this doesn't fundamentally change the hero. You're kind of seeing like a common theme here where a lot of these characters just get slapped on the wrist that don't do enough to change how good these characters are. And I do understand that the bubble is going to change Hulk's survivability and also his ultimate charge. Like, I get some of that, but it doesn't matter for how good Hulk is. Hulk is still going to be one of the best tanks in the game. He was actually one of the most banned characters in the game towards the end of the season. In addition to that, Hulk synergy with Iron Man was left untouched, which is just so strong, and also Doctor Strange gets that, so it's just so freaking powerful. And even though I do think that Venom is quite a bit more powerful this season than before, once again, that synergy just doesn't line up for Venom in the same way it does for Hulk. I mean, I think Hulk has higher carry potential anyways, but you add the fact that Iron Man is just crazy with Hulk. I mean, yeah, synergies kind of dictate a lot of compositions in general right now. So you would rather pick a character that might even be weaker alone with a more powerful synergy the majority of the time. So two comparable characters, but one has a more powerful synergy. You would much rather run the synergy. That's just how good synergies are right now. Now, the next character is a character that actually does feel the changes. I know the past 5 have been characters that haven't really been affected that much, but Psylocke does feel these nerfs. Specifically, the fact that her ultimate targets barriers now means that when a character has a barrier, like a Doctor Strange, for instance, all of a sudden, Psylocke's ultimate becomes far less lethal. And in general, it becomes far worse at even using on tanks or using in big groups like it was before. Most of the time, you're not going to generate a kill at all if you try to do this. And now, more than ever, you need to change how you're using your ultimate to target isolated characters, people that are by themselves, alone, away from tanks. Like, don't expect just being able to go onto point, pop this, and do a ton of damage and even kill people, because now there's a lot more ways to mitigate this ultimate. So you're going to have to be very selective with how you use it, a lot more selective than you were before, but you could still, you know, get a lot of value from it if you use it correctly. It's still a very powerful DPS ultimate, and Psylocke is still a top tier DPS in general. It's just this ultimate is a fair bit weaker when before it was probably way too strong. Now, next up is Black Panther, and Black Panther did receive some big nerfs to the amount of shield he gets when he goes in through his combos, and there are going to be some situations that you're going to die that you would have barely lived. You're taking a lot of damage, you get hit by this and that, and you're able to get out barely. Now you're going to die because of these changes, but this is not actually most of the deaths or most of the time that Black Panther isn't effective. It's not these moments where you barely get out at 1 HP. It's the times where the engagement doesn't even go right at all. Like, most of the time with Panther, because the engagements happen so fast, it's like you get crowd controlled and then it doesn't really matter how much HP you had, or you get out scot-free. And you take damage, but it's not enough to matter. And that's kind of still how Black Panther is. Like, there are going to be some small amount of engagements that do actually change because of this, but for the most part, it's not going to really change how Black Panther is good or bad. I don't even think it changes him in a tier as far as how good he is, you know, from A to S or S to B or whatever. It doesn't change him at all. Now, there are going to be a couple of isolated one-on-one situations that he would like to be able to have a little bit more shield generation, but really, Black Panther can carry the same as always. And while this one is going to be a bit more felt than some of the other changes, it's kind of akin to like the Hela change, where it does make the character weaker, yeah, but it doesn't make the character unplayable or fundamentally different than they were before. Granted, there's another wave of characters that legitimately are way worse in Season 1 as the meta has adapted. Players have gotten used to these characters, or these characters didn't get as much love as other characters because there were a lot of characters that were buffed, but some got left behind, didn't get as good of buffs, or they didn't get any buffs at all. So the first character we got to talk about that is actually a loser in Season 1 is Jeff. Jeff the Shark is a character that at the beginning everyone thought was busted. As he was throwing people off maps, he was just kind of killing everybody like that. People were like, wow, this character is just S tier, he's the best character in the game. But really, we started to slowly learn, as we've slowly played the game more, that this is a gimmick. And with every gimmick, there's ways to counter gimmicks. And when you don't have this gimmick, and I call it a gimmick ultimate because it's kind of like a cheese way to win fights, if it doesn't work, then what are you doing the rest of the time? And yeah, Jeff has a lot of heals. He does a crazy amount of healing, but not bringing anywhere near the amount of utility that all these other supports bring. And with Invisible Woman being added into the roster, another character that also brings a crazy amount of utility, Jeff the Shark is just undoubtedly the worst support. And even supports that were more comparable to him, like Rocket, his buff to Rocket is way better than Jeff's buff. I do understand Jeff got a buff. It's just nowhere near the same impact as the Rocket Raccoon buff, especially in a world with Winter Soldier and Punisher getting buffed as well. Once again, that synergy is just really good. Jeff the Shark synergy is just like kind of a whatever. It's not even good most of the time. Riding on Tank's shoulders is just like actually the worst thing you could do. You're going to get kidnapped by Wolverine. But in addition to all these things, it's a lot easier to dodge his ultimate now because it's easier to see. There's more defined lines. And yeah, just in general, Jeff has kind of been left a little bit behind. I think that there's reasons and strengths into all the supports. I think all the supports are incredibly strong. They're very, very powerful. From Loki to Cloak and Dagger to Rocket, all of them are so freaking nuts. But Jeff is just okay. And, you know, there's going to be some games where he is good, but he's not bad, but he's just not the same level. Now, the next one, number 9, is actually Iron Fist. And Iron Fist is a character that initially everyone freaked out about. Are you seeing a theme here? Because this theme is going to keep happening. Everyone freaked out about Iron Fist is so busted, nerf this character, he's soloing my backline. How do I beat an Iron Fist? Everyone's just freaking out about Iron Fist all the time. But as we slowly started to realize, this character is not really that good. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, his engagements last too long. Yes, he has the ability to counter and block, but he doesn't kill fast enough to get in and get out, and he's a melee character, so every time he goes in, he's submitting himself to risk. And this works when people aren't helping each other out, ain't looking out for each other, everyone's playing all by themselves. But as people get better and better, this character gets worse and worse, and we're seeing that supports have a lot of ways to fight back against an Iron Fist, to the point where I think two competent supports that are playing together will just never ever die to an Iron Fist. Like, there's just no way that they lose to this character. And while, yes, there are some Iron Fists that can find success in high elo, they get really good at this character, they have to work so freaking hard to get the same amount of value that another character can get, like a Black Panther, where he engages like at triple the speed with more damage in a very fast interval, so people have to react much faster to him, while Iron Fist goes very slow and his engagements are slow. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that Iron Fist actually deserved buffs, and some people might be freaking out. First, they're freaking out that I said he's bad, and now they're freaking out that I said he probably needed buffs. But really, this character is among the worst DPS in the high elos of play. I even think in the mid elos of play, he's not particularly good. And with so many small buffs to so many characters, a character that probably needed buffs didn't get one, he falls even further behind. So yeah, Iron Fist, I'm putting you in the losers category. Now, I actually do have 2 honorable mentions. There's actually going to be 12 characters total. And this next hero is one that I think is going to be the most controversial in the video, but it's Penny Parker. And before you get riled up, I'm not saying that this character isn't good. I'm not saying this character is bad. I'm just saying she's situationally great. And the reason that that's important is that there are going to be some situations where Penny Parker is oppressive and really powerful. If there's choke points, if she's holding space on defense, she's protecting little areas, and she can kind of play around a front line, this is great. Penny is kind of in her vibe there. She gets to apply a lot of mitigation. She's really, really good against characters that want to dive in. So, you know, if they have a really good dive character, you're going to shut them down a lot. You're going to shut down dive tanks a lot. But there are moments and times where she's really not the greatest. So she's not good as a solo tank most of the time. She's not going to be good as a character that has to take space as good as other tanks are in any way. So like when you're trying to push up to areas, she has to kind of piece by piece take space, you know, take this area, set up there, move a little forward, set up there. Like that's what she has to do because her kit is primarily meant to defend positions and not take positions. She also doesn't do that great against long distance damage dealers. She doesn't have a lot of game against these long distance damage dealers. Like she could still hold back the front line and, you know, all that, but she really thrives the best when she's shutting down divers. So depending on the composition opponents play, she's going to have situations where she's good or not that great. And she didn't receive any buffs to kind of offset that power level or anything. So there are going to be moments where Penny literally feels oppressive and it's so freaking strong, but there are going to be other moments where I just think other tanks are better. And if we think about a tank like Doctor Strange, there isn't a situationally good or bad time for him, right? It's just always good. Like, he's always great. And I'm not talking about scrims or tournament play or anything like that. I'm just literally just talking about in ranked play. Penny has times where she's amazing and times that she's not. And Strange has times where he's amazing and times where he's amazing. Now, it's not fair to say that she's a bad character or anything like that relative to, like, the best tank in the game. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that in Season 1 now, we know how to counter her more than ever. We know what's good and bad against her more than ever, and there are still key moments where she doesn't really get to do that much. And so I really would say that in general, Penny is not a tank I would recommend one-tricking. Not a tank that I would recommend playing all the time. You got to play her in her best moments. You got to know what those moments are as a Penny player. But in general, if you're like off-rolling looking for a tank to learn, I wouldn't recommend Penny as like the first, second, or third choice for you to learn. Now, number 11, this one is, you know, once again kind of falls into the Iron Fist, Jeff the Shark. As far as characters people thought were busted and then turns out no, is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a character that really looked freaking insane, but as we started to play more and more in Season 0, we realized that this character has to do a lot more for the same amount of value as other characters. Like, you gotta go in, you gotta execute combos, you gotta hit all your shots mechanically well, just to get one single kill. It requires a lot from you, and there's a lot that can go wrong during that entire process. So it's really hard to do. It's not saying that you can't carry on Spider-Man, but he has a lot of weaknesses and a lot of vulnerability points during his execution, during his engages. And I think that one of the things I am attributing people thinking Spider-Man is a lot better than he really is like the Necros effect, where players come out that are just so freaking good at this character that you see that and say, oh yeah, Spider-Man's busted. But even players like that don't play Spider-Man at the highest levels of play when it's a super competitive lobby, unless they're, you know, in a lobby where they're just kind of messing around, because Spider-Man is one of the worst DPS in the game. And I think you ask any top level player and they'll tell you that's true. This doesn't mean you can't win. This doesn't mean you can't carry. This doesn't mean you can't climb on this character, but he is definitely a character that just requires a lot from you to just not get as much out of him as other characters can. And in addition to that, with the new Season 1, there was a lot of his techs that were actually patched out. He did have some animation cancel techs and things like that that people learned, but those got patched out. I did hear that there are some other ones that people are finding out, but still, when a character has like any little crumb of power that people are like trying to find, they're trying to figure out, oh, how can we get more min-max value here? And then it gets, you know, patched out. That definitely sucks. And I would say that actually Spider-Man deserved a buff more than a lot of other characters that did get buffs. Like, I am a Winter Soldier player. I don't understand buffing Winter Soldier over buffing Spider-Man. I don't understand buffing Punisher over buffing Spider-Man. I don't get this. I don't understand. The number 12 is Mr. Fantastic, and I got to play a good 10 plus hours with Mr. Fantastic, with Mr. Fantastic's on my team, enemy team, and I got a good early impression. So keep in mind, the other ones are more definitive. This one is more, you know, can change, subject to change. And I would say that the early impressions of him is that he seems hard to place, and the reason is he doesn't do these two things. He's not good at poking from range. He's limited in his range. So he's not a character like Hawkeye or Namor or Hela that can fight from distance. right? So, you know, he can't lob distance damage, which is kind of important when you're playing around like Doctor Strange double shield compositions with Magneto, or you're playing with Doctor Strange Groot or whatever. You want to be able to do damage from range. You don't want to have to get in close, right? The second thing he doesn't have is mobility. He doesn't have any way to close in the gap or move around. And if you think about characters, like I want you to think about all the characters in the game. How many characters don't have poke and don't have mobility? They don't have both those things. Now in the DPS category, it's literally only him. Panther, Wolverine, both mobility. Hela, Hawkeye, both poke. Squirrel Girl, poke. Black Widow, poke. Star-Lord, mobility. Namor, poke. Like, you get the point. Like, he doesn't have these two things that all other DPS do. So if he's going to see play, it's going to be in a composition that we've never seen before. It's going to be in like a tank hybrid role or even a tanking role, because those are the only characters he shares any similarity with, where tanks, some of them don't have the ability to poke from range and they don't have good mobility. Like a character like Groot, for instance, is a character that would, you know, fall in the same category as far as not a poker, no mobility. And you got to kind of ask the question, is Mr. Fantastic a character good enough to be played instead of a tank? Because really, a lot of the tanks are very strong, and I would have a hard time seeing it, or at least I'm having a hard time seeing it now. What would Mr. Fantastic replace? Because I certainly wouldn't want him over a Groot or a Doctor Strange or a Magneto. And yeah, I want you to think about that. Think about where this character goes. Think about what he can do and what he can't do and where that would go. I'm having a hard time visualizing it, but maybe someone will invent something that has never been seen before. It just doesn't slot in to any of the things that we already have. So if you wanted me to bet money on it, I would probably say that he is going to be a lot weaker than Invisible Woman is, but we'll have to wait and see, because we were wrong about Wolverine. So I think it's important not to make our opinions up too early and then all of us be like, oh wait, this character's busted. Anyways, definitely let me know if you agree or disagree with all of my losers in this video. Did you enjoy the video? Let me know down below, and check out the free Coaching Academy event. Check out the Discord down below for more information, and I'll see you there.